Hello everyone, and welcome to part 3 of the Matplotlib lecture series. In this final part, we're going to talk about setting colors, line widths, line types, and really customizing the options of how your plot actually looks. Let's go ahead and jump to the Jupyter Notebook to get started. Okay, here we are at the Jupyter Notebook. Let's go ahead and talk about setting colors with Matplotlib. So I'm going to go ahead and just say fig equals plt.figure. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a set of axes to this figure. Ax is equal to fig.add_axes. And I will set this at 0, 0, 1, 1. And then, whoops. And then off of that set of axes, I'm going to say ax.plot and do x comma y. And this is a reference to the same x and y that we've been working with. So if I go ahead and plot that, I get something that looks like this. Now I can edit this color of the plot by putting in the color parameter. And the color parameter can actually take multiple arguments. It can take in arguments such as common color strings like blue, or let's go ahead and put in orange. And we can see we get an orange line out, or green, and you get a green line. So very basic color names it can actually accept as a string. If you want to start getting more detailed, you can actually put in RGB hex codes. So I can put in hashtag and then some RGB hex code, such as, let's go ahead and just copy this from the notebook, FF8C00. Oops, 8. And that gets you a more custom color. So you can go ahead and Google search for RGB hex code, maker or creator, and you should have plenty of tools available freely online for actually coming up with these RGB hex codes in case you want to make a very custom color. But for very basic colors, basically kind of Crayola colors, such as purple, you should be able to easily plot them and just pass in the string. Okay, so that's the basics of colors. Now let's talk about line width and line style. If you want to edit the line width, you can actually just pass in line width as an argument and just put in a number. So for instance, if we put in 1, that is the essentially default line width. If we want to go double the default, we can say line width is equal to 2, and that will double the width. And we can continue doing this. So if I want a very thick line, such as line width equals 20, that's 20 times the thickness of the default line. Or if you want a very thin line, such as half the default thickness, 0.5, you can start getting thinner and thinner. Another very useful tip as far as line width and line visibility is the alpha argument. So I'm going to go ahead and set my line equal to line width 3, and you can specify the alpha argument, which allows you to basically control how transparent the line is. So I can say alpha is equal to 0.5. And if I run that, now you can see we actually have a little bit more transparency on this line. So you can combine color, line width, and alpha in order to get the exact appearance that you want. One last thing to note here is for shorthand, you actually don't have to type in line width completely. You can just type in LW and it will still work just fine. Okay, so we talked about line width, color, and alpha. I'm going to go ahead and remove the alpha call. Now let's talk about line style. So I can type in line style. And line style, there's quite a few options and they're listed in your notebook, but it basically just defines the style of the line, such as a dashed line or a dotted line. For instance, if I pass in 2 dashes, I end up getting a dashed line. I'm just passing this in as a string. Or if I pass in a dash and then a period, I get this sort of dashed line. So dash point, and then there's a couple of more options such as colon, which gets me these smaller dashes here. And you can check out the Jupyter Notebook for this lecture to see what other options you have. And then you can also do steps. However, I rarely use those. Most often I'll just either do a dashed line, or if you just put in 1 dash, it's just a solid line. Okay, and just like with line width, you actually don't need to type in line style. You can just put ls, and it will end up working just the same. Okay, so we talked about line width and line style. Now let's talk about markers. So markers are going to be used when you have just a few data points. For instance, if we take a look at x as a reminder of what it is, we can see that x is just an array of, go ahead and check the length of x, of 11 points. Let's say I actually wanted to mark where those 11 points occurred on this plot. Well, I can specify marker as a new argument, that should be a comma, and then I can pass in a string. So there's lots of possible marker symbols and they're listed in your notebook, but the most basic one and common one is just this lowercase o as a string. And there you can begin to see some dots that basically mark out each point on x versus y here. And there's a wide variety of markers available to you. They're all listed in your notebook, but just to show you a couple, you can do things such as plus signs, which don't show up too well here. You can do things such as little stars, like asterisk symbols. You can do things such as passing in these number codes. I'm going to make the line width a little thinner so you can actually see these markers here. Let's say we wanted to make these markers bigger. Well, you may have guessed that marker size is an argument. So you can go ahead and specify marker size, and essentially just 1 is the very small size, and then if we want to make it quite a bit larger, we can say 10, and here we can begin to see these kind of triangles begin to form. So let's go ahead and say just huge markers at 20. And then we can specify marker type here, 2. We can say plus, we get these pluses here, etc. So all these options are listed in the documentation, and more importantly, in your Jupyter notebook, since there's so many different types of strings you can pass in as marker for marker codes. And if you really want to customize your markers, for instance, let's go ahead and put this back to lowercase o so we get these points here. I'm going to change this line width back to 1. There's actually quite a few options as far as specifying what the marker looks like. You can specify the marker face color, the marker edge width, and the marker edge color. So for instance, I'm going to go ahead and add these arguments in. So I'm just press comma enter for a new line, and I'm going to go ahead and say marker face color. And you can specify the marker face color. So that'll be the color inside of that circle. Let's go ahead and make it yellow and run this. And that changed the marker face color. Let's say I want to change the marker edge width. I can go ahead and edit that as well, make that a little thicker, such as 3. That makes it a little thicker. And let's say I actually want to specify the color of the marker edge. I can specify marker edge color. And let's go ahead and make that green. Alright, so we can see there's a lot of customizability here, and there's a lot of options. If you want to see a bunch of examples of different options, you can go ahead and jump to the Jupyter Notebook for this lecture. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Just going to go ahead and click on over. And if you see here under the Matplotlib Concepts lecture, right now we're in this section line marker and line and marker styles. Here there's basically a figure where we did 12 by 6 on these subplots as far as figure size, and did a bunch of plots and edited the colors, the line widths, the line styles, and here's just a bunch of examples so you can go ahead and read them out. And if you're looking for different possible marker symbols, they're all here as comments or line style types, etc. So there's a lot of different examples here that you can kind of copy and paste from or build your own knowledge off of. Finally, let's talk about control over axis appearance and plot range. And if we hop back over to our original notebook over here, we can go ahead and show how we can set the y limit and the x limit. I'm going to make this just a very simple plot again. Let's go ahead and just make this line width equal 2, and let's make line style equal some dashed line. Okay, great. Let's say I only wanted to show the plot between 0 and 1 on the x-axis. Well, to do that, you can just call your axis, and then say set underscore xlim, and then you pass in a list with a lower bound and an upper bound. So we'll go from 0 to 1. And here we can see we've set the lower bound and upper bound of the x-axis. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing for the y limit. Just call your axis and then say set underscore y lim. And as a list, you pass in upper bound and lower bound. So lower bound at 0, comma, let's make the upper bound. Let's go ahead and just put it at 2. And now we can see this plot. And notice as we zoom in, the plot looks more and more like a bunch of straight lines connecting points, which makes sense because we don't have as much detail since there's only 11 points. As we zoom out, we see more of a curved line. And we can fix that by getting more data points or by zooming out. Alright, finally I want to hop back over real quick to the Matplotlib Concepts lecture. and talk about special plot types. There's lots and lots of many specialized plot types you can do with Matplotlib, such as bar plots, histograms, and scatter plots. Most of these plot types, we're actually going to use another visualization library called Seaborn, which is much better suited for these sort of statistical plotting methods. But just to show you that you can do this in Matplotlib, you can perform scatter plots, such as this. You can perform histograms using Matplotlib, or even things such as box plots. And here are some examples for you. Now, at the very bottom of your Jupyter Notebook for this lecture, you'll see a bunch of links for further reading, including the project webpage for Matplotlib. And one link I really like is all the way here, second to the bottom, this loria.fr. This is a really nice link. It's a Matplotlib tutorial. Hopefully you actually know quite a bit now by watching these 3 lectures that we just did. But what I really like about this link is that it's essentially just a reference code. So if you want to change colors and line widths, you can go ahead and check out this link. Just look at the figures and it will tell you how to set ticks, set tick labels, etc. Moving spines, adding legends. A lot of these points are actually in the other notebook for this lecture series called the Advanced Matplotlib Notebook. We're not actually going to have a video lecture on those advanced topics for now because we're not going to use them too often throughout the course. In fact, we're mostly going to be using Seaborn throughout the course. Okay, coming up next is a quick overview of the Matplotlib exercise, and then you'll have an overview of the solutions for that exercise. For now, go ahead and hold off on these special plot types and wait till we learn about using Seaborn, which is going to be much better equipped for these sort of beautiful statistical plots. Okay, thanks everyone, and I'll see you at the next lecture.